Ladies and gentlemen, excuse me, welcome along to another episode of EOTT with me, Jimmy James, and always a pleasure to share another conversation with you guys. And this evening we're joined by my brother, Paul McGowan. Paul, how are you, brother?
Okay in the circumstances.
The circumstances, indeed. So, yes, thank you for taking the time to come and chat with us, Paul. Paul and I met quite recently, actually. Essentially, I've been following the Brian Harvey story, and some of you will be familiar with what's going on there. Some of you won't. For those who aren't, I would advise you go and check it out. There's some shenanigans afoot right there. Quite plain to see, really. Paul and I had a bit of discourse in the comments, and Paul had quite an interesting story, it seems, and he's been kind enough to come and share it. It's quite a story. It's probably going to take a few hours, so this might well end up being a multi-portion segment, but I think the best thing for us to do is start at the beginning, Paul, if you'd be kind enough, brother. So where did this all start for you, brother?
Okay, well, it started in the 90s when I was living in London, and it's sort of developed from the late 90s onwards, and it's continuing till this day in 2019. It's a very, very, very strange story and very unusual, and it accompanies with it some rather major revelations about the UK government, a large spy network operating in London of a global nature, not just UK members, and some of their methodologies, techniques, tactics, and also, very importantly, some of the technology they are using to do some very, very extreme things to victims. It's came about, as I say, started in the late 90s. I was, at the time, roughly 96, 97. I bought a little flat in Maida Vale for not much, about 45,000, I think it was at the time, to do up and live in, obviously. And I was working at the Post Haste Courier place in Covent Garden. I was doing night shift, and I was driving Chris Evans to his breakfast show 6 in the morning, because he lived literally a few hundred yards away at that time, right round the corner in Notting Hill. Now, I had been, throughout the 90s, I've done things like played in bands and so on, and I had encountered, one or two members of the sort of, if you want to call it, underworld or whatever, not necessarily criminal underworld, but just a general sort of party kind of underworld, and this, that, and the other, the sort of scene that comes with people living in London. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with it. I sort of knew a couple of people from earlier in the decade that were involved in the party scene and this, that, and the other. Although I didn't have a great deal to do with them. I pretty much went my own way in the mid-90s. I played in bands, as I say. I went to Turkey and this, that, and the other, and then eventually went to Post Haste Couriers. Now, and this is where it sort of started, really, roughly 97. Now, I was doing a night shift at Post Haste Couriers, and I was just a normal friendly guy. I was in late 30s at the time. I mean, first thing I will say is that I've never used a computer at that time. I wasn't, aware of the internet much, and so on. It was in early-ish days, I suppose. And I certainly didn't know about the, I didn't know, I'll put it as honestly as I can. I didn't know there was, gazillionaires and multimillionaires and all this dotted all over the place. And what I've come to recognise as a kind of sort of something of a fanatical kind of nature of some of these people. I didn't know about that at the time, because I'm just an ordinary guy from working class background. But I got involved with these people, and what happened from the late 97 to 98 approximately radically altered the course of the rest of my life for the next 21 years or more. It made a huge, difference to my life, and it also radically altered my views on political people, the UK government as a whole, and various other governments, USA government, Russian government, etc., etc. Largely because of what I got involved in, which is pretty extraordinary stuff. I was, going off at a tangent. It also made, it eventually came to sort of ruin my worldview a little bit. The sort of people I got involved with, their activities, what they're doing, what the kind of things they're doing to victims. Again, something I've come to recognise is actually, all over the UK. It's not just in London. And it's it is extreme and very nasty stuff. And eventually, it took me quite a number of years to sort of come to the conclusion. The first 10 years I got involved with them, I didn't even know what they were doing at all. Yeah, and it sort of slowly unravelled itself over the following 12 years. And I sort of reached a stage where, the conclusion I've come to, and some of the revelations that I have to come out with, are pretty extraordinary, and will probably shock people. And essentially, what we're talking, what I'm talking about here, is getting to grips with a global sort of criminal kind of network of operating a Stasi style of total secrecy, that is of an extreme New World Order, Agenda 21 kind of bent. And this is what I've come to recognise they are doing, to victims. I don't know how many other victims there are in the UK, but there are, it seems to me that over the last 20 years, there's been a massive increase in homelessness, massive increase in very low pay, massive increase in people struggling to make ends meet, etc., etc. And it's pretty shocking stuff, because
it does seem, Paul, if I may quickly, there does seem to be a lot more groups now online with regards to this targeted individual business. And I'm kind of, as I've said to you, I do keep my ear to the ground, and I've been looking at a few of them, and a few of them are coming from different angles. And as you say, no one seems to be talking about the stuff that you're going to get onto and talk about. But that is kind of the hope, really, with regards to talking to people like yourself, is to get more awareness out there, because I'm sure there'll be many more people who are, or have done, or continuing to experience these same things, but are unaware of what's even going on. I think possibly is the case for a lot of people.
I make the odd comment. I keep an eye occasionally on the 5G groups and things like that. People are getting concerned about 5G. And there's a number of groups, and I've made comments occasionally in those groups. The comments I make seem to go completely over their heads, because I always state in those groups that there is a lot more than just 5G in terms of weaponized technology that the UK government is using on people. Yeah, it's not just 5G. There's at least 7 more kinds of technologies and mythologies, and probably even more than that. Yeah, and these have, to my knowledge, certain knowledge, being rolled out and can be and are used on any individual in the UK, and they are used in a kind of zersetsung kind of fashion and style. The victims may not necessarily be psychologically abused. I'll use the term zersetsung, and that's got connotations of the psychological abuse aspect of it.
And I will put a link in the description box for zersetsung, and we will put some information in there. But give us a little bit of a breakdown, if you would be kind of, Paul, of just what zersetsung is for those who are listening now.
Zersetsung, this is, I struggled for many years to try to describe and define what had been done to me for those 10 years. I struggled for a long time. It was I was shocked by what happened to me, and I literally couldn't describe it to the state. It was so profound and so unusual what was done to me, I just clammed up about it. I didn't tell anybody. Yeah, I couldn't describe what had been done, literally. And it was, I kept quiet for quite a number of years about what I'd been involved in. That was a mistake. I should.
Was it fair to say, Paul, there was a bit of a fear of getting sectioned and things like that?
Not necessarily, not that, no, because there wasn't.
Okay.
After the first, at that point, there wasn't too much of the abuse, psychological abuse or anything like that. At that point, not so much of it.
Okay.
It was mainly the gang stalking and the way I was completely manipulated out of society by a large group of people. That was the sort of shocking part of that for me. The way my life just sort of was completely manipulated on a day-to-day basis, on an almost hourly basis for many years. And that was a shocking part of it to me, that somebody could actually plan all that out, implement it, and have the capability, the manpower, and the ability to put it all together and literally plan out my life for something like 10 years.
I think it's fair to say, Paul, it beggars belief, doesn't it, for those with absolutely zero knowledge of the situation or any experience of being, on the receiving end of it. It does kind of beg a belief, but this is what's going on. This is what a lot of people are talking about, and unless we're talking about mass hysteria and people all over the world talking about the same things. I know we've discussed Catherine Horton a little bit, and she's putting together these affidavits from people all over the world. So it is there. People are talking about it. So it's becoming, to my mind at least, it's come to a point now where there's just so many people talking about it that we need to shine a light on this and get these people together to find out exactly what is going on and where we can try and look for some recourse. I know you're trying to find some legal representation, and I'm not fully aware of this.
Try to pursue a war crimes against humanity, zersetsung, attempted murder, and state terrorism charge against the man who is doing this to me, who's called Yves Carlo William, and I published his name on my Facebook group. Yeah, and so on. I went to his wedding in 2004, as any group sort of readers will see. And these are charges I would lay against Yves Carlo William. Now, there's a lot more as well. They're just the core things. I mean, really, it wouldn't fit on a sheet of A4 paper.
Yeah.
Literally, the stuff that this man's been doing to me over the 21-year period is pretty shocking. People would not believe that somebody would do this on a sort of daily, weekly basis for 20 odd years, to have done to you, being gang stalked for that length of time.
I can imagine, brother. I can imagine.
And then finding out that they'd actually already decided to dispose of you at that time, and that, as I say, came with property frauds, thefts, various coercions and manipulations and so on at the time, which I wasn't aware they were doing.
Just from my own discovery, potentially leave people powerless for any recourse. No resources, no property, no breaking down social relationships, gaslighting with the families. Just so many different levels to it.
Yeah, it is, as I have come to discover, classic zersetsung methodology. That what they have done is taken those techniques from from the 70s, 80s or whatever, zersetsung, East German state and so on, that are all documented. The way that what they did to those people, and that they've sort of taken it to a new level. It's highly evolved now, and it is sort of actually integrated as I've discovered, into the fabric of capitalist society in the UK. It is augmented with very extreme and very capable weaponized algorithm surveillance technology, which my description of it is a kind of high-tech space-age control grid, where they can literally control and manipulate an individual, often without their knowledge, in the tiniest of detail. They can literally manipulate the victim's life. They are using complex algorithms to predict the victim's behavior. They're using various triggers, weaponized algorithm surveillance triggers, to literally mutate the reality of the victim's life, day in life. In some very extraordinary ways, which I have described. I've been looking for the hard evidence of that for some time, because I've always known they were doing that,
What were the first things, Paul, if I may? What was one of the first things then that you discovered through subsequent research that were kind of eureka moments then, if you like, where you went, I've experienced this, or you found some kind of technology, right, that's what's being used against me or whatever. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, please?
Okay. Well, I mean, as I said before, the 10 years gang stalking, I largely didn't know what they were doing. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't describe it to anyone, the experience of it, having it done to you. And some of the stuff I saw, I also, couldn't describe either. And then slowly, things after I came, I left London. I was left homeless, and I was declared dead in the Daily Mail in 2007 in February.
Tell us a bit more about that, if you would, Paul, because that's quite a strange scenario to find yourself in, I imagine. Being declared dead in the local paper.
I'd been used in this project for 10 years in total. I was left homeless, and my property had actually disappeared in preparation in 1999. That it had literally disappeared. I subsequently discovered, quite obviously, that was done deliberately, and in fact, the perpetrator kind of admitted it on the phone when I phoned them in 2006. So it was, my life was completely planned out. In the tiniest, literally the tiniest of detail. And everything that they did, it was irreversible, and also it set me up for the next part of whatever the plan was, and so on. It was all completely planned out. The being declared dead in the Daily Mail was kind of the conclusion to that part of the victimization. The 10-year period of gang stalking and manipulation by these people sort of concluded with me being declared dead in an article in the Daily Mail. The subject matter was actually the gangsters that I was used as live bait for, And I'll stress also that, I didn't actually know any of those people. I'd never met them. I didn't know any of them, literally none of them. And
when you say used as live bait, what was the scenario there, Paul? What was going down? Because I know you told me a little bit about the.
Well, what happened? I was sort of it sort of came in three sections. The first section from 98, roughly 97, 98, to about late 2000 was turning my social circle into spies, and turning me into a kind of drug dealer, if you like. That's what I got turned into, and it was all deliberately manipulated. None of it wasn't a career choice.
Was it kind of the situation scenario where you were asked, "Oh, can you do this? Can you get that?" And you were, "Well, I kind of probably would know someone," and then it just kind of grew and evolved.
It was,
organically, but by design, so to speak.
William used one of his low-level spies called Rocky to do it. He was sort of introduced to Rocky by a girl I knew at the time, and that's how it started. Rocky started introducing me slowly to various other people. And these, by and large, most of them turned out to be spies. At the end of it, they turned out to be spies. And so it was, you know, when I sort of analysed what had been done to me, he was introducing me to his spy circle, so that I could be manipulated. Yeah, that was the reason for it. The sole reason for me being introduced to these people was so that they could manipulate me on a daily basis. And what happened was, I was eventually manipulated into a spy house run by a girl called Parissa in Hamilton Terrace. And you know, at the time, obviously, I didn't know any of these people were spies. I didn't, know anything at all. You know, to me, they were just people, friends or whatever that I'd been introduced to, and they were just normal people like anyone else.
And I think it's fair to say, Paul, if I'm not mistaken, it's a bit of a different life in London, the city kind of life. Whereas I grew up in a village in South Wales, and kind of everybody knows everybody. Or even if you venture down to Cardiff, it's still kind of like social. People know each other, but in London it can be a lot more kind of.
Yeah.
You know what I'm getting at, don't you? It's so many. You can meet so many different random people, and it just seems natural. It just seems normal because of the way the city kind of operates.
Having been involved in what I have been now, I'd estimate there's possibly up to something like 5,000 people operating as spies in London. Yeah. I was manipulated by something like 200 of them, and 30 of them I have already got in my evidence folder. I'm waiting for the phone records of the phone I was handed. I was handed a phone. That's the number I've got now, and was handed it. Just given it, out of the blue by one of them. I can't remember exactly which one it was now, but one of them gave me this phone, just handed it to me. Said, here, have a phone, and, looking back, I can see that phone was given to me for a reason. Yeah. Because I already had a phone. So they gave me another one. Yeah. And this is a key point in the way that I was manipulated into homelessness at the time and out of London, etc., and out of society in general, during the course of the thing I was, used for. But they handed me this phone, and it's a key element. It was used to separate. Eventually, it was used to separate the spies from the gangsters as such. Yeah. And what happened was, towards the end of the project, the spies rang one phone and the gangsters rang the other, and slowly the gangsters were weeded out. They were compromised in various ways, which was obviously the intention, and so I was left eventually with just a few spies ringing me on one phone, and that was the reason. It was very cleverly done. I didn't know what they were doing at the time or anything like that, but that I'm waiting for the phone records from that phone, which will show, irrefutably, who some of the other people were operating. These people were operating tacitly together in a conspiracy to manipulate me over a very long period of time. Yeah, they were literally controlling my life for many years. It was many years, that they controlled my life.
I think at this point, Paul, it's worth asking the question, as a thought that's popped into my mind, and I'm sure it's a thought that'll pop into other people's who are hearing this narrative. What's so special about you, Paul? What was it that
I just put it down to that I was considered at the time suitable for use in their project. I was suitable to be set up and used for that project because of my circumstances. I was,
the fact you had the flat, the fact of your social circles.
I was living alone. I was in, and so on. I did know one or two people from previous years and so on. As I say, I'm the first spy I met turned out was in 1993, and I didn't discover her to be a spy until 2001. Although I didn't have a great deal to do with her during the 90s, I did see her a few times, and it was kind of just, it's clear to me that at the time I was useful. I was literally set up as a patsy, the fall guy, or the useful idiot, or whatever you want to call it, to be used specifically for the purposes of that project. The actual, what they were doing was I was literally used as live bait. They were using me in order to compromise, catch, or manipulate major criminals of the era. It was to do with the Adams crime family,
Okay.
and other associates of theirs at the time. Again, none of whom I actually knew, believe it or not. I never actually met any of them. I didn't know any of them. I've heard of them, but I'd never, had anything to do with them or anything like that. I was literally set up for that project, and manipulated in position, quite deliberately. And that's sort of how it came about. And it's sort of in three sections. The first section was manipulating me into place. The middle section, the hardcore part of it, is when because they're also manipulating the criminals as well. There's a lot of spies in London, more than just the 200 that were manipulating me. Yeah. So there was obviously other people involved in manipulating those criminals at the time and things like that. So it was highly organised, very, very cleverly done. And what they did is, it's pretty obvious, looking back now. They manipulated these criminals and so on. They using psychology. They're using the psychology of the criminals that they are targeting. Yeah. And those sort of people have a kind of very strict, sort of psychology when it comes to dealing with people and so on and so forth. And it doesn't take much to get some of those people decide they don't like you and things like that. It doesn't take a lot. And this is what they did. These people, I'd never met, these criminals, were literally, it seems, manipulated into deciding to want to kill me for no real reason, because I didn't even know them. So it is, again, very bizarre and very strange kind of situation to get into. And what happened was a large contract was taken out on me. Unknown to me, obviously, at the time initially, and in the way that these things are done, nobody tells anybody anything. Generally, a large number of people decided to kill me. So very unusual situation. And as I say, I subsequently discovered it to be completely manipulated by William and his spy network. I subsequently, during the course of being involved with them, I discovered they have blanket control over everything in London. There's literally nothing that happens in London without these people knowing about it. And I mean literally, yeah. 7 million people or whatever. There's literally nothing that happens there without these people knowing about it. So you have got a large spy network there, Stasi, kind of network that is not MI5, it's not MI6 or anything like that. It is a completely independent thing.
So these people then, Paul, are operating above and beyond the jurisdictions that people kind of understand to be our kind of,
on a level that other people do not understand.
Above and beyond all jurisdictions, kind of like your Bank of International Settlements. These people are not subject to any laws.
I watched William operate. I was involved with him personally for a number of years. William operates on a tyrannical level. I watched him manipulate and control police. He was predicting to me on a regular basis what was going to happen the next day. Regularly had it pointed out that police were going somewhere to do something or whatever. This was all involving the criminals that they were targeting and using me as live bait for. Yeah. And so I witnessed a lot of things, a hell of a lot of things, more than anybody else could probably possibly, ever witness, because I was involved in a hardcore major takedown of quite a lot of major criminals of that early 2000 era. Yeah. And another thing I recognised was that none of those criminals ever knew what had happened to them, or what did they ever. None of them ever knew the real reason that any occurrence sort of occurred, or any, you know, they never got to know the real reason or the real force behind it. It was always put down to something else, and this is a very common component of, you know, of the activities of these people. They always make sure that whatever happens is put down to something else. Yeah, it's never put down to them, because essentially they don't exist. Yeah, so it is a very, you know, unusual thing to witness and to watch being done, and so on and so forth. You know, it's very, you know, enlightening, to say the least. And yeah, you know, you literally. So I was literally watching people getting manipulated in the similar way to I was, and in a similar way, themselves not knowing really what was going on. You know, that they didn't know. Yeah. And this is how it all was, you know, sort of panned out. You know, everything was done in total secrecy. Everything, all communication was completely tacit, kind of like telepathy or whatever. You know, no overt signals or instructions or anything like that. All completely tacit. And this is the way they dealt with everybody. Yeah, both me and the, you know, criminals they were targeting as well at the time. None of those criminals ever knew what had happened to them. I read it, you know, I read from here that one of the main targets was Terry Adams, the gangster, and you know, I read that his house was bugged by MI5 and this, that, and the other. Now I knew that to be complete garbage. That was in the paper. I knew it to be complete garbage. There was no bugging of his house. Yeah, they're using far superior technology than just you know, phone taps and all the rest of it. Yeah, far superior technology. It's entirely not necessary to bug his house. Yeah, because they can, you know, as I subsequently discover, they can decide who Terry Adams meets in the street in the same way as they've been doing to me for the last few years. Yeah. So they're using very, very extreme technology to do that. So you know, you got some propaganda in the paper about this, so this happened or so and so, and that was all again propaganda, or just, you know, covering up the reality of what actually was going on at the time. So, you know, I got used in that project, set up to be used for that project for a specific reason. I seem to be in, I don't know, wrong place at the wrong time, or useful idiot, or, you know, whatever you want to call it. And I was set up to be used as live bait. So that was the first section, the sort of...
What can you tell us, before we move on, if you would be so kind, please, Paul, what can you tell us about your discovery of these you know, advanced technologies that put what we're told they use is just child's play, considering, you know, we had nuclear submarines, what, 100 years ago, right? So we know keep it all suppressed, but tell us a little bit, if you would, about the kind of technologies that you've discovered and that you've seen.
The technology, I mean, these technologies I've come to recognise as being used. They're using it on me every day today. You know, as I say, I've mentioned, I've had 2 subliminal messages today. Triggered events. They are using, you know, weaponized algorithm. I'll give it a term: weaponized algorithm surveillance technology, because they are predicting what the victim can do next, what does do next. So they're analysing the victim's behavioural patterns. You know, what he eats, what they eat, what program they watch, what time they get up in the morning, all sorts of other stuff. They go really deep into the victim's psyche. You know, what the victim's sort of mentality, or, you know, fears, all sorts of other, you know, some very, you know, very intense analysis of the victim's circumstances, and their sort of like obviously they watch the victim's lifestyle. They watch, you know, they literally know everything about the victim, quite literally. more so than the victim himself, yeah, because they've got an external view, you know, of the victim. That they can see a lot more than the victim can, yeah. So they've got a really intense view of the overall picture of the every single aspect of the victim's life. They obviously know the background, the family, workmates if they have any, etc. And so on, you know, and I've had references to, as I said before, references to 26 years ago in some of the subliminal messages, and that's not a paper record or a, you know, electronic record. That's just a series of events that happened for a few months in '93. I've had references to that, so they've actually logged my life going back, you know, nearly 30 years, yeah. And I've had references to that in some of the subliminal messages. So you're talking about extreme analysis of the victim, you know, the subject here, and much
certainly
more.
Certainly enough to make somebody think that they're losing their mind, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, much more capable technology than a few wiretaps.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as I say, you know, as far as I mean, we'll come to that later. But I've had, in the last 6 years since William drove past the top of the road here, I've had well in excess of 20,000 subliminal messages, triggered events, and various other mutations of my reality. And I recognise how they're doing these to me, and the fact that they are doing them. You know, obviously it's very disturbing. It's been going on very solidly for the last 6 years. You know, which caused me, obviously, a few years ago to start looking for help from lawyers and so on and so forth with regard to it. But, you know, obviously I'm looking to take into account the whole 21-year period, because what's happened to me is that I have literally had my life watched and controlled in the minutest detail for 21 years now. And it's caused massive isolation from, you know, society, from family members, from, you know, completely out of society. Really, I got removed from society. You know, so it is very, you know, disturbing stuff. Especially to find it still going on, and I'm sitting here at 61, and it's literally still going on. You know, so it's very, you know, it's very disturbing stuff. It's not something I ever expected to get involved with. I didn't plan on sort of being the sort of George Orwell of the 21st century. You know, I wanted to be an entrepreneur or whatever, or something like that, but it didn't turn out that way for me. You know, I got my life taken over literally for 21 years. As I say, the conclusions in later years are very, very disturbing indeed. They're very relevant for any other UK member of public. You know, because I have come to discover that this network is essentially the government. Yeah, it's not what you see as a government. It's not, you know, what people you see in Parliament and things like that. And I've discovered that to be just the middle there.
Yeah.
You really have got these people operating on a fanatical level with extreme levels of fanaticism about the way people should live their lives. Yeah. And so it is, you know, essentially I have come to recognise it as a sort of tacitly manipulated slave empire. You know, it's not something I like to, you know, come out with, really, because people think you're sort of a rabid socialist, or, you know, or some kind of screaming radical, and stuff like that, you know. But this is, you know, my knowledge of the use of this technology, the network behind it, the fact that it's global, etc., you know, and various other factors, certainly, especially to do with the victimization of me, tell me that generally people, not just in the UK, but all over the place, USA, Russia, various other countries, have got serious problems. You have got an Agenda 21 kind of New World Order scenario, with levels of control far exceeding what you think are, you know, traditional democratic or whatever kind of, you know, scenarios. So you've got a sort of very unusual situation. You know, you've got what people think is the truth and what is really the truth. And you know, I put various things on the Facebook page, group page, to illustrate this. You know, which I know for a fact. I know for a fact that very high level and very wealthy people are involved in this, and there is a fanaticism, there is a kind of hierarchy, there is an elitism, there is an attitude that everybody should work for them, as it were, you know. And the sort of the trail goes back to Wall Street, if you like, yeah, that kind of thing. The trail goes back to Wall Street and the manipulation of sort of lower members of society to, you know, to provide the value that they are living off, etc.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, again, it's not something, you know.
Sweat equity, as they call it.
Fun?
Sweat equity, I believe they call it.
Yeah, that's right. You know, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. So, you know, I am, you know, essentially a capitalist, but I just didn't get the chance over the last 21 years. That's my, you know, that's the problem I've had. I ended up working for free for spies for 10 years, you know, getting left homeless, declared dead in the Daily Mail, and then abused for another 12 years, you know. So that's took out like most of my life. Yeah. I didn't get the chance. So, you know, it's hopefully something I'm hoping to rectify. But, you know, I'm sitting on a very, very badly damaged life because of what I got involved with. You know, and as I say, what I did get involved with was never, ever at any point, anything to do with me. You know, I didn't know the gangsters I got, you know, that were trying to kill me. I didn't know them. And prior to them sort of infiltrating my social life, nor did I know any of the spies. Yeah, it was all completely manipulated. You know, I was literally sort of dragged into this kind of, you know, very, very bizarre Orwellian kind of spy network.
So where was your first realization then, Paul, that, you know, oh, something's going on here? Obviously there would have been little signs of stuff you thought,
so I'd got
right,
so we said the gang stalkers in sort of 3 stages. The first couple of years was essentially them infiltrating my life and manipulating me into this bizarre situation where I was, you know, some kind of drug dealer or whatever. In reality, I was just somebody who used, you know, occasionally used drugs and got manipulated into a situation where I was getting it for these spies. I mean, you know, they were literally ringing me on a daily basis to get them this, you know, this stuff and all this, you know. So it was kind of sort of got something I got sort of dragged into and fell into, you know. And that's the first, as I say, the first couple of years, and it was being set up. I was being set up for that gangster project. And then towards the end of 2000, I'd been plotting up by invitation at the spy house in Hamilton Terrace, run by Parissa. And this is where I met Yves Carlo William, who was an occasional visitor there, along with quite a few other people. Another prominent person who was a visitor there was Jake of Brown's, who owned Brown's nightclub, and he sold it in late '99, as far as I'm aware. But he was a regular visitor to Parissa's, and she was also one of his good friends. Yeah, I have subsequently assessed Jake as being one of the gang stalkers, because Jake also came, I was invited at one point to stay at another spy's flat in Cricklewood called Zoran, who was a Montenegrin. And Jake came up there a few times as well. So, you know, looking back at it, they were all working together. Yeah, these people were all working tacitly together to manipulate me. And as I say, Jake was one of the regular visitors at Parissa's. And that's where I was kind of set up for it, I think, really. I was invited to plot up there and got and sort of meet various people and this, that and the other. And a lot of them, a few of them were spies. William obviously was, is the Stasi spy behind it all. He was coordinating it all, everything literally. And I saw him there a few times. And as I say, a number of others. There was another one a bit further down on Hamilton Terrace, a financier called Simon Margolis, and he has been assessed as a spy as well. He was also operating tacitly in that network. Yeah. So these are all people collaborating tacitly together to manipulate me. Yeah. And these people sort of comprise my entire social circle by and large. I didn't know, I was literally removed from where I was, which was working at Post Haste Couriers, into kind of being a full-time drug dealer. But no, not intentional. I sort of got manipulated into that situation by these people, So that's, that's what happened. And that's what took up the first 2 or 3 years of the gang stalking and the spying and so on, the manipulations. And then towards the end of 2000, Parissa mysteriously sort of disappeared. Well, she didn't disappear. She just stopped inviting me to that place anymore, So I found it a bit strange. The invite was removed and I was no longer welcome there for some reason. And this was sort of the start of the gangster project, if you like. This is hardcore of it, and this brought on the next 2 or 3 years, 4 years roughly, when I got really heavily involved and watching all the activities and all the manipulations and the mythology, the ideology I witnessed. Also 2 staged taxi accidents as well. And this was in the next sort of 2 or 3, 4 years, and this is sort of the middle stage, if you like, of that gang stalking period. So the middle stage, this was towards the end of 2000, and I'd been sort of manipulated into position, if you like. I was now, I suppose, a kind of drug dealer. That's what sort of became. It wasn't intentional. I'd been manipulated into that situation by the spies who'd sort of been taken over my life, really. They became my entire social circle. They were the only people I knew, smattered in with the odd couple of criminals, I suppose, that I was also introduced to at the time. I never sought any of these people out. I never went out my way to go and meet them or anything like that. It was all done by deliberate introduction.
And do you think it's probably fair to say, Paul, that there would have been other people in the same position as yourself being manipulated and used within extended networks or what have you?
That's right. There were other people being used as well.
Have you managed to kind of meet any of these people or reinitiate contact? Or
never seen them since. No, I did note during the course of the project that a guy I'd known for a few years earlier was being watched as well, and he reported to me once that he'd had some strange technological intrusions in his flat in Cricklewood. That's a guy called Chris Rajkumar, and I believe he was being watched because he lived in social housing, and this is another aspect of it here.
Oh, you did mention this, yeah. If we could go into this, that would be great, because you mentioned a few people who were
in social housing. Yeah, one of my old school friends was in social housing in East London in the mid '90s, and it was indicated to me that he was watched as well. So these people were kind of doing, as much as anything else, so we're also doing social clearances, sort of clearing out people they sort of don't think to be any good, or, again, it's kind of elitist thing,
They want to free up all these properties, don't they? I've seen it all. They want to free up these little areas which were designated as social housing. They want to clear them all out, knock them down and build giant high-rises, which are essentially safety deposit boxes for the billionaires, aren't they? They build these high-rises, multi-million-pound flats.
That's right, yeah.
You're a billionaire, you buy 10 flats worth, 50 million or whatever. Safety deposit boxes, essentially, is what it boils down to.
That's right. So, there were, as I say, there were a couple of people I know to have been watched who are in social housing and things like that, and these people were earmarked for removal, if you like. They're no good. They don't want them, etc., etc. So I don't know how many other people, victims of that kind of thing, there were at that time, but I do know it was going on, and I believe there have been social clearances in London from at least the mid-90s onwards. Yeah. Now I wasn't actually in social housing. I had my own flat in Maida Vale, so this is a bit of a something I've got major objections to. I'd bought my own flat, and I was defrauded out of it as part of that the manipulative process on me at the time. And it was all that was done during the huge property boom of the late 90s, which was 300% roughly, and I lost a lot of money because of that. And I believe also there were other victims of that, property frauds, or various again mechanisms or manipulations to relieve those people of their properties, with the specific intention of making sure they didn't profit from that boom. Yeah. Because that boom, that property boom of the late 90s was, my assessment of it was it was deliberately engineered by two other people I know to be spies. Yeah. And again, this is where we're coming back to the Agenda 21 directive. One of the Agenda 21 directives is that the lower orders don't own property. Yeah. And this, as far as I can see, it was part of it. And so, I've got a kind of roadmap of the boiling frog effect of Agenda 21 in the UK over the last 30 years, starting with Soros' attack on the pound in '91.
Oh, our old mate George Soros, eh?
Yeah. And then continuing with the Cengiz brothers' manipulation of property values in the late 90s, 300%.
What was that name again, Paul?
The Cengiz brothers.
I've heard that name, yeah. Quite high rollers in the property business, right?
High rollers in the city. They are. I know them. I know those two people to be operating as spies.
Okay.
Yeah? They are listed in my evidence folder. Yeah. As I say, this is one of the major problems I've got here is that these people are very wealthy people, very well-known people. Some of them, they're not going to take kindly to being revealed as spies, and certainly not Agenda 21 spies. But the situation I'm in is I'm being victimised to such an extreme, life-ruining level that I've got to try and get some help from somebody. And as I say, I'm looking for international criminal courts. I don't envisage doing anything in any UK court for what was done to me. Because
we know the courts are all sham. We know all this. We know they operate under the Crown and all the rest of it. So do you feel then, Paul, that it's kind of having to escalate this, as you say? We talk about the Hague, for example, with the international war crimes.
The level, what they're doing to victims. I mean, what's being done to me is a complete destruction of somebody's life. It is a complete, literal, complete destruction of the victim's life, career, finances, income, assets. Generally, what they are doing is removing the victims, sort of negating the victim's potential. The extreme psychological abuse reinforces that. They literally abuse the victim psychologically, so that they literally themselves think they're no good. It's kind of a double whammy psychological thing. Yeah, they literally hammer the victim into the ground. Using as I say, the subliminal messages of psychological abuse and the various other manipulations of the victim's life. So you've got a very nasty kind. What they're doing is they are actually murdering the victim, not traditionally by stabbing them or shooting them or anything like that. they're doing it by ruining the victim's life. They're making sure the victim has no assets, no income.
Snow kill, I think, is the correct term, is it?
No assets, no income, no life, literally no nothing. Yeah, the sort of erasing the victim from society. Yeah, that's the fundamental core of it. That is how I believe they are doing Agenda 21. Yeah, not by directly killing them as such, but by manipulating the victims financially and career-wise and asset-wise and, you know, personal life-wise and various other ways of compromising the victim very heavily, you know. It's not a very nice thing to come to terms with, knowing that somebody's been doing it to you for 21 years, you know, which is what's been done to me. So, you know, it is a very unusual thing, not something I ever expected to encounter in my lifetime. You know?
I bet. Yeah.
But I mean, prior to being involved in all this, I never used to have any political views whatsoever. Literally none. I didn't even vote against the poll tax in the 80s. You know, I was completely vanilla. I didn't know about all this stuff. You know, so what's happened to me has radically altered my view of the UK government, politics in general, and also the general, you know, I think people have got a serious problem with Agenda 21 and the New World Order thing that's been sort of implemented over the last 30 years. It's pretty, as far as I can see, what I've witnessed with these people, the likes of Eves Carla William, Chengiz brothers, Charles Gabriel, his associate Kayvan, and lots of other people. They're all documented, and if I get the phone records, a lot of those people will show up in those phone records as gang stalkers or spies who manipulated me. Yeah. Now you've got a kind of situation where you've got elitist people fully invested in Agenda 21, kind of, you know, destruction of other people's lives, etc., and the general subjugation of society and subjugation of the lower orders, keeping the lower orders, you know, down and essentially having, you know, by and large, fruitless lives. And that is what Agenda 21 is about. It is making, you know, generally making certain people who they decide are no good or whatever, having fruitless lives. So
can I ask you something, Paul? Can I ask you something? I've seen, you know, you've got Hunger Games movies, right? Are you familiar with the Hunger Games films?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it does seem to be that this Hunger Games, there's a lot of stuff encoded within the films with regards to Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, with regards to the zoning, for example, the zoning in London, where they're zoning off these areas.
Yeah.
Anybody who saw I think it was the forgive me, I forget which one, G8 or G10 or whatever the summit was in South Wales. And you know, like they've got that £1 million super fence that goes around Glastonbury. They put up the equivalent of that, but it was all the way from Cardiff to Newport, which is not that far, but it's a good, for argument's sake, we'll say 15 miles, maybe 20 miles. And they put this huge fence up as this kind of safety precautions for all the, you know, the leaders of this summit. And it just made me realize that, you know, this zoning stuff, that's what the goal is, to zone off the city and have the elites, whatever you want to call them, all safe within the city, and then the rest of us are all going to be zoned off. These are the plans. It's all there in black and white.
It has been developing over the last 30 years or so, and as I say, it started with, you know, one earlier event was the Soros attack on the pound. Now that was I remember when that happened, and it was, you know, shock horror. Politicians were sort of shock horror. George Soros has attacked the pound, right? And he's striped billions off from the UK public, you know, the UK, you know, economy, etc., etc. And it was all sort of shock horror from the politicians. Now, I know that that was deliberately, that was allowed, you know, it wasn't, you know, no attempt was made to stop it. Yeah. So essentially the politicians are going along with Agenda 21. Yeah. So people generally, in terms of politics and democracy and all this, people are being completely duped. They are voting people into power who have got literally no concern for their welfare. Yeah.
This is it. It's a hard thing for a lot of people to come to terms with, Paul, and for myself as well.
People are used to this idea of some kind of democracy and so on, which
it's a mockery.
In fact does not exist.
It's a corporatocracy, isn't it, masquerading as democracy?
That's
essentially
right.
What we're dealing with.
Because as I say, the boiling frog effect. If you go back to Soros and the '91 attack on the pound, that was allowed by John Major at the time, I think it was, and nothing was ever done about it. So it was a start of an erosion of people's living standards. Various other aspects of their lives. And it has ultimately led to. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed. If you go online now, YouTube and various other places, you will see how many thousands of videos you will see, right, from people saying how to make a fortune online when you're broke, right? And you know why so many of those videos are sort of listed?
Go on.
Because there's so many broke people.
Yeah.
There are literally millions of broke people.
We're all on our asses, Paul. It seems to be, this divide is now being bigger. It's just,
you would not have got this 30 years ago. Yeah, I don't recall seeing, back in the early 90s, so many broke people. Yeah, I didn't ever anticipate being in any kind of broke situation when I was coming through life in the 90s. You could live in London in the 90s, pretty much anywhere for £50-60 a week, right?
Cool. Try to do that now.
I bought a flat for £50 a week. Yeah. So you can see how the erosion of people's lives and living standards have generally it's come about by deliberate manipulation. I've always said the property boom of the late 90s, which was engineered by the Cengiz brothers, there was I believe at the time the population actually went down. So how on earth could anyone justify actually property prices going up 300%? It wasn't it wasn't an extra demand for housing, was it? Because there's probably less people, or slightly less people than there were. There was no population boom or anything like that. So it was a deliberately engineered event. Yeah. So somebody trousered all that money, and it wasn't the UK public. Yeah?
No, sir. No, sir. And we've seen, and it's just another little aside, but we see it was so blatant, the Royal Mail thing, for example. And I know there was a lot more prior with Thatcher and selling off all the stuff, but even just the Royal Mail thing, that was a lot more research for me, a bit older, a bit more wiser, and a bit more aware of what's going on, and just seeing them just blatantly just ripping off the public, and everyone's just like, oh well, yeah, that's kind of just how it is, and this is the way things are, and this is how it goes. It's like, oh, is it? Is it really? Is this, we're just going to accept this, are we? No.
I think unless people start to recognise that it's not just how it is and how it turns out, but it is all completely deliberately engineered.
All by design.
There's nothing that the UK government do by accident.
Exactly.
Nothing whatsoever. So, as I say, my experiences with these people and being victimised for 21 years has radically altered my view of the UK in general, people in the UK, especially the government, of course, because 3 years ago I was wrongly diagnosed with schizophrenia, when in fact what I have got is a very, very serious long-term government criminal spy problem, and that unless I get legal help for that, it's not going to change, because I definitely 100% have not got schizophrenia. So it's a pretty, I didn't expect to ever get into this situation, but this is how things have developed for me after getting involved with these people, you know. So, you know, yeah, there's a lot of tangents and a lot of takeouts you can get from this, you know.
Yeah.
I still got a positive outlook, but at the end of the day, I've reached a point in my life when I've been manipulated for 21 years now by these people. Started with property frauds, thefts, gang stalking for 10 years, using I was literally shot at every week for 2.5 years by people I didn't even know. I was then made homeless. I was then declared dead in the Daily Mail, which is pretty much a career-ruining move, a sort of episode, yeah. And, you know, and it's gone on from there. I've had another 12 years of extreme victimization, escalating to the last 6 years of probably some of the most extreme and unusual technological cycle abuse ever seen in world history. Yeah, that's what I put up with. I'm still here, but only just. Yeah, and that's my situation. I'm about 401k off my 401k, so I've had to have a real re-evaluation of my life, because at 61 now, there is no job that'll even get back the £3,000-4,000 I lost when I got involved with these people. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so I've got to really re-evaluate what I can possibly do from the point I'm standing at the moment, you know.
Well, that leads me on to my next question then, Paul, which is basically like, you know, I saw you were commenting on some of Brian Harvey's videos talking about bits and bobs, which just intrigued me, and this is how you and I have kind of begun our narrative, and it just so happens I'm just doing my little thing with the podcast, and anything to kind of, you know, this kind of information to me personally, having personal experience of little bits and bobs and also seeing what's going on the ground level, just wanting to, you know, raise awareness. But before you and I, you know, had any kind of conversation, were you just kind of in a bit of a limbo situation then, Paul, with kind of not being able to...
I've been in a limbo situation for 21 years.
Yeah? What I mean is more recently, though, you know,
Recently, yeah, I mean, I got... as I say, I had the 10 years gang stalking, yeah, and being declared dead in the Daily Mail, which was a bit of a shock, you know, reading my own obituary. And there was also a pack of lies in there about the property that I lost, you know, was defrauded out of. That was, that they'd said that I'd handed the deeds over, but I've got evidence here that wasn't the case, and I've got
what actually happened there, Paul, if you wouldn't mind giving us a bit of background, because I've got personal friends who've experienced exactly what you're talking about, so it'd be good to hear your specific story if you could.
It was a rush through repossession that happened in September and November 1999, and it was totally planned out and deliberately manipulated. Yeah, it was fully intended to liquidize what assets I had at the time, so that they could get spent in the early stages of the project, and that's exactly what happened. Yeah, it was all completely planned out, and I've got the evidence here in front of me. That I've got letters from the Halifax at that time saying in January that there was no problem with that property. No, you know, they weren't taking any action or anything like that because everything was up to date. And then mysteriously, 8 months later, it was suddenly in peril again. And within 2 months it was gone. Yeah, so somebody deliberately engineered that. Yeah, it was done deliberately to liquidize what the assets I had at the time. It was subsequently sold for double what I paid for it, and those proceeds were spent by Yves Carlo William at the beginning of the gangster project. He got rid of them in about 2 months. Yeah. I didn't know what he was doing at the time, you know, because I was obviously too trusting of a person. So at the time, he seemed like a bit of an authority figure. I knew, he did appear to be helping me at the time. That subsequently turned out not to be the case. So that they was got rid of, and it was obviously, you know, looking at it now, it was all deliberately planned out. They literally planned out my life. From 97, 98, got rid of my property, got rid of my life savings and etc., and I was then stuck in their clutches for the following few years, you know, because I didn't really know what else to do at the time, you know. And that's how that kind of panned out. I was, you know, they spent all the money, and I was left stuck in that project, not knowing really how to get out of it, and also not knowing what the conclusion would be, which was I was left homeless. So that's, you know, and it was all, as I say, deliberately intended. So that's, as I say, that's how that 10 years panned out. You know, it wiped out 10 years of my life. I spent 10 years with like no pay, no pension, no national insurance, literally no nothing, just sort of living sort of hand to mouth for the 10 years or whatever in total. And it did in fact wipe out well over 30 years of my life, because I was left completely homeless and completely penniless. And I was pushing 50 years old at the time. So, you know, not a very nice kind of thing to happen to you. And it did lead subsequently to 4.5 year period of a kind of post-traumatic stress disorder and depression and things like that. When I realised what had been done to me, you know, it was a very depressing kind of thing to get done to you, you know. When I realised it had all been deliberate, and I'd literally had 10 years of my life wasted with these people, completely deliberately. It was quite a shock. You know, I got post-traumatic stress disorder and depression and things like that, and it was a very shocking experience.
I bet.
Yeah.
So, where did things progress from this point onwards then, Paul?
Well, we're still at the key. We're talking about now the middle part of the gang stalking, which was the hardcore of the gangster project, and this is where I was coerced into participating in it and so on, and literally watching half of London trying to kill me and this, that, and the other at the time. All these other criminals and so on had been persuaded that I was, you know, to be disposed of or whatever.
And what was the situation there then, Paul? Were you
It was all the, you know, it was related to the Adams crime family.
So you were they were told then that you were some kind of snitch or whatever the situation is.
I don't know what was told.
Right.
All I know was that they were trying to kill me. There was a contract out on me at the time, quite a large one that lasted about 2.5 years.
Right.
Yeah. And I watched them pretty much every week, various different factions, you know, and different people coming in to try and kill me. Pretty much every week that happened. Yeah, there was an attempt to kill me pretty much every week for about 2.5 years. Yeah.
When you say attempts to kill you, you mean give us some examples if you would.
Motorcycle assassins, taxi cab assassins, people I knew calling me up to meetings where I was supposed to get stabbed or disposed of, or various other ways that they do these things, and so on and so forth. And there was quite a number of those occasions during that period. Obviously, none of them ever succeeded.
Cat with 9 lives there, Paul. Cat with 9 lives.
Yeah, well, you know, it was a very strange situation. You know, I didn't really know why I was involved in it, why I stuck around, because I was told initially by William that it was some arm of MI5 or whatever, you know. And so that's why I stuck around, because I sort of thought it was some kind of, you know, authoritative thing, you know, MI5 and this, that, and the other. And that proved to be completely false. Yeah. So that's, you know, that's that bit to the sort of start of this period when I was introduced to William as the sort of authoritative organizer of this spy network. And quite a lot of his other buddies, spy buddies and this and the other, you know. This is where it started in March 2001. Now, one thing I'll point out here is that since that point, March 2001, I've pretty much lived my entire life on my own, yeah? Because from that point, I was separated from society completely, yeah? I lived the sort of next 3 or 4 years on my own, being as a target of these criminals. I was, completely separated from anyone else in London at all. I was sort of, my entire past in London was erased. It was, it just disappeared. The only people I knew at the time were the spies who had infiltrated my life. Yeah, they were the only people who were, who I knew on a day-to-day basis, and they were all pretending to be my friend for, pretty much a 5-year period solid, and then slowly dissipated and disappeared towards the end of the thing when I was left homeless. And I was at the end of it, I was literally left having just wasted something like, 8 years of my life. I was literally homeless, defrauded out of all my properties, defrauded out of my life savings, and I was literally left stood without even a bus ticket in the middle of Earl's Court at the end of it, So I'd done all that for like nothing, for no reason whatsoever. Yeah. I got involved with it, being coerced into getting involved with these people for zero reason. There was never any benefit to me whatsoever from, doing all that stuff that I did at the time. There was literally no benefit. It was a complete waste of my life. Yeah. So that's, another sort of something that I found a bit shocking, later on when I realised what had been done, that somebody deliberately wasted 10 years of my life, just to suit their own, agenda or their own ends, and so on. I found it a bit shocking. I found it very shocking, that somebody deliberately wasted 10 years of my life for no reason whatsoever. Yeah. So it started in March 2001. Williams approached me, and it was, implied it was some arm of MI5, etc. And this is where things got a bit of a roller coaster, roller coaster ride. It became a kind of roller coaster. I had no idea what was really going on. I was watching some very strange things going on. I was watching a large spy network operating tacitly to manipulate large numbers of people, not just myself. I watched the use of the technology when I witnessed personally 2 staged taxi accidents during that project. Yeah, that's vehicle accidents which are not natural, which have been deliberately engineered using weaponized algorithm surveillance technology. Yeah. So that opens up that itself opens up some new avenues in some other cases where people have died in vehicle accidents. Yeah, because it is known and I witnessed by myself that vehicle accidents can and are sort of set up or staged using weaponized algorithm surveillance technology. So it is a
How do they actually do it, Paul?
I obviously don't know exactly how they do it. The problem with this kind of technology is it's not, you don't see it. You only see the results of it. You don't see it itself. You see the results of it. Yeah. So that's a very, unusual scenario. What you are seeing is a phenomenon or, occurrences of things that have been deliberately, manipulated or staged or whatever. You can't see the technology doing it because it's, somewhere else. It's, 1,000 miles away or whatever. Yeah. But they are without question. And, as I say, I watched 2 staged taxi accidents during that project. So I know they can do this stuff with this technology. Yeah. So that's that. I watched that. I watched 2 of those, and I also watched some other aspects of their methods and the way they operate that will become a bit more clear, as we go along. For instance, the fanaticism for things to appear normal and natural. Yeah. This all went to the lengths of opening up the art bar in Walton Street just for me to stand in for a year. You know, I was pretty much stood in there for a year, every night for a year, as at the tail end of the project thing. You know, it was open deliberately for me, just for me to stand in. It was a kind of safe house, if you like, where comings and goings were watched and manipulated, you know, of various people and so on. You know, and that was open just for me to stand in. Another aspect, another example of that is, you know, at one stage I got a bit, you know, irate at, you know, having all these people trying to kill me who I didn't know, and sought to get something to protect myself with, and this, that, and the other, you know. And I said I want a chainsaw. So what happened was, William said, go to Selfridges, get one from there. Yeah. And so I went to Selfridges, and it seemed, what happened was an entire floor, a new floor, it had clearly been just opened, yeah, in the basement of Selfridges, selling garden tools and various other kind of tools. And lo and behold, they sold chainsaws, yeah. So I bought one from Selfridges, and that seemed to me to be open specifically for me to go and buy a chainsaw, yeah. In other words, the way they were manipulated, it was manipulated just to look normal and natural, yeah. It wouldn't do for anybody, any of their, you know, members or, you know, participants, spies or whatever, to come and hand me a chainsaw. I had to be seen to go and buy one from somewhere, yeah. Hence, it looked natural and normal, and this is one aspect of the mythology of these people, that is very, you know, evident. They like things to look natural and normal. So essentially, things have got to sort of just happen, or they either just happen naturally and normally, or they don't happen at all. Yeah, it's kind of complete hands off. Yeah, and this is the core mythology of the way they manipulate victims, and it goes back to the zersetsung directives of nobody knows what's happening or being done, and there's no admission of anything. Yeah, so there's no admission of anything that going on whatsoever. Yeah, complete sort of denial as to, you know, what is that something is going on or something is happening. And this is what one thing I noted throughout the whole thing. You know, everything was completely tacit. Communication was tacit. No direct sort of instructions or anything like that. It was always
coming to plausible deniability then, I guess.
Yeah, it was all implied, or, you know, sort of all very, very cleverly manipulated, tacitly manipulated. Yeah. And there was lots of examples throughout this, when I was involved with them, you know. And there were also smatterings of the subliminal messages that I've come to recognise in later years being done. There were smatterings of that from a few of the people involved as well, you know. So you know, we'll come to the. I think I've got examples of some of those on the timeline that I've started to do for the whole period. You know, some examples from some of the people that were involved. You know, and the way they pass on subliminal messages to the victim as just part of the proceedings. You know, just they seem to have a kind of fanaticism for subliminal messages. You know. So again, that's it's very disturbing. You know, you're talking about people who are sort of manipulating victims and sending them subliminal messages. I mean, you know, I was told on 2 occasions. I was told by Helen in Edgware Road that my future had been mapped out. Yeah, that was one thing she said to me. And I was told by a USA businessman in Knightsbridge that I'd been taken out of the loop. Yeah. I was told by Yves Carlo William himself that, a couple of different things, that everything would be okay. At the end of it, I would have a nice life. and thirdly, that I would get what I deserve. Yeah. Now these are all kind of ambiguous. Yeah. You could take them one way or the other. So it was, it's very cleverly done how the victim is manipulated. Yeah. It's inferred that one thing is inferred when in fact another thing is actually meant. Yeah. And this is again another, this is the kind of thing I had to put up with at the time, And so I've got all these people sort of pretending to be my friend, and in reality, they are destroying my life. Yeah, and that's what happened. That's basically what happened to me at the time. And it went on for 10 years, as I say, in total. But as I say, I mean, it can get to describe the actual project itself, the hardcore period of it, where I was, people were attempting to kill me, and it was a roller coaster kind of situation. Some of those days I did not know, whether I was going to be alive at the end of it, and things like that. It was, very unusual, but it was quite frightening. I once went on one occasion in Edgware Road at Helen, one of the spies' flat. We were sitting there, and it was clear that I was being set up again to be attacked or shot or whatever they do with these things. And I got a bit frightened. I said, I knew I had some of the a couple of the gangsters sort of phoning me, and I knew that they were doing something, setting me up to do something. And so I looked at Yves Scholar William, and I said, what to do here? And he says, oh, no problem, just go down, deal with it, and you'll be fine, right? And anyway, I did go down, and what I did see was about 10 times as many people wandering around outside than would normally be there at that time of night. Yeah, these are all other spies. Yeah. I didn't know any of these. This is a lot of other spies, and there was a lot of activity. And it was clear that particular attempt to kill me was cut short, or stopped or whatever by the people downstairs at the time. There was quite a lot of spies there. There was a lot more spies involved overall than just the sort of hardcore 200 or so that were manipulating me at the time. So it's why I, concluded there's probably a lot more spies than people think operating in London. Could be 5,000, it could be 10,000. You wouldn't really know. Yeah. So it's a very, very large Stasi network of a very similar nature to the zersetsung, East Germany, kind of thing. And if you study those cases, you'll see that it was a very large network, and this is what we have got in the UK. Yeah, the same thing. Yeah, and they don't work for MI5, so that's the takeout you can get from that. But as I say, it gets a lot more sinister when you're looking at later years as what's happened to me in more recent years and the stuff that's going on. It's a lot more sinister because now you're looking at a massive control grid here, not just some spies in London. You're looking at a complete high-tech space-age control grid, yeah, where they can literally control victims' lives. I mean, I'm 165 miles away, yeah, and it's been going on here for the last 6 years, yeah. So that's what I took out from that was that there's a lot more spies in London than people think. Yeah. It's kind of like Spy Central. Yeah.
And this is it. Everyone's MI5, MI5, MI6, MI6. When my friend James used to work in a shopping mall over in Germany. And he was friends with some guys who worked on the American military base installation nearby. And just a little aside, one of the guys worked on something to do with satellite access. And he was saying that people would call through and they'd give their identify a code, whatever that was, and the access codes and all this kind of stuff, and they'd be allocated. Oh, right, okay, yeah, cool. You're allocated half an hour access to the satellite, or an hour. Except that some people would just come through. There'd be no identifier. Excuse me. They would just give a certain access code, which meant that they didn't need to identify themselves who they were, and they were given unlimited access until they were finished using it. And it seems that when you hear about presidential clearance and things like that, that there are multiple levels of clearance above presidential level, where even the president doesn't have access. You think these people, they put all these infrastructures into place, and they're also at the disposal then of these nefarious independent groups.
Yeah, I mean, it became crystal clear to me that this sort of operation or whatever was a major operation against major criminals of the time, of the period, and it was also nothing really to do with MI5. The people I've identified as gang stalkers, were manipulating me. None of them work for MI5. You have got a banker for Goldman Sachs. You've got an oil company executive called Clive Ossols. You have got a financier called Simon Margolis. You have got a financier, former photo booth magnate called Charles Gabriel. You have got the Cengiz brothers. You have got their sidekick, Kayvan. You have got quite a lot of different people, of reasonable levels of UK society in London operating as spies. Another one was Adolfo, who was a good friend of Robert Hanson, the insurance executive. Another one was Jake, the owner of Brown's. There were 3 Montenegrons, Zorro in Cricklewood, Rocky, the low-level, technically always homeless guy who manipulated me in the first place, and was in fact the last person I saw, or the last one of them that I saw, when he was sent to here in Doncaster in 2006, essentially to keep me here and stop me going back to find out what had actually been done to me. So there was a lot of different people involved in this, and a lot of them of high levels of social standing and this, that, and the other in London, in corporate environments, in banks. One was a BBC executive called Iris. Another one was an Egyptian magazine editor called Nisa. There were various other people involved. As I say, I've got 30 listed in my initial evidence thing, and I'm looking at those people for coercion, manipulation, intimidation, victimization, and quite a few other things. They're conspiracy. All those people operated in a conspiracy to manipulate me for a very, very, very long period of time, which essentially took out 10 years of my life. So that's that. There's a lot, I think there's a lot more to it than just, there is a lot more to it than just my story, or a gangster story or whatever. There's a lot more to it. Essentially, all of us, myself, the gangsters, and quite a few other people, were lumped into the one same kind of group. That's people to be sort of compromised or disposed of one way or another. Yeah, and it's also symbolic. There's very heavy element of symbolism in their activities as well. That, as far as I can establish, I've actually come off probably worse than any of the gangsters in the project that were targeted at the time. As far as I can see, they've been sort of taken down symbolically. Yeah. For example, Terry Adams lost his mansion in Mill Hill and went to live in a 1-bed flat. Yeah. Things like that, symbolic takedowns of people. Now, I'm pretty sure Terry Adams is not in my situation. Yeah. So it should give you an indication as to the, the sort of revenge aspect that's been perpetrated on me by William and his other spy associates, because I'm revealing their names and revealing the whole shebang and the whole use of the technology in the UK, and the whole Agenda 21 thing. Yeah. Essentially, I'm being victimised because of, although I kept quiet for many years, I have decided, I obviously came to the conclusion that if I didn't say something, I was going to wind up literally picking up banana skins out of a rubbish bin. Yeah. So, as I say, I've come off a lot worse than the targets themselves. Yeah. They don't seem to have done too badly, I'm sitting here looking at a ruined life, yeah, irreversibly ruined, yeah, because of what got done to me for 21 years, and which is still going on today. So there are other examples of government victimization of people. Essentially, I think the Pink Floyd guitarist just came out recently about Julian Assange and this and the other. Now, I don't really know the situation with Assange, because I know that there is a very close association with Russian people in London. Yeah, there were quite a few Russian people involved in the Eves Carlo Williams network. Yeah, there is clearly a very good relationship with Russia between these people. Yeah, it's not, as in Luke Harding's book, a war with the West or anything like that. There is a very close cooperation with Russian people in London and the UK element of the spy network. Yeah, so that's why I've stated that Luke Harding's book on Litvinenko is complete garbage. Yeah, it is a propaganda exercise. Yeah, and another instance of that is when I was handed the book on the Robert Maxwell assassination by one of William's spies again, David Levine, in Edgware Road, and he handed me that book inexplicably. He just handed me it one day, and that's an example of them tacitly telling people what is really going on. Yeah, it was a tacit notification that the network I was involved in and was being manipulated by had actually done the Maxwell murder. Yeah, and that book was in fact also a propaganda exercise. So if in fact they have been committing these murders on a regular basis and covering them up, then you were talking about a very, very capable, very secretive, and very criminal network. Yeah. It looks to me that, given the fact that I know that nothing goes on in London at all, or in fact the UK, without these people knowing about it, that they've probably done all the murders: Maxwell, Litvinenko, Bereznov, Diana, the lot. Yeah. Uncover them all up. So that's essentially...
This is how they roll, isn't it? This is how they roll.
So you've essentially got a very, very seriously criminal UK government. Yeah. And this is why it is almost certainly my knowledge of all this now, why I'm being victimised on a major level by these people. Yeah. I'm being victimised on a level far exceeding the damage they've done to any of the criminals that they were targeting at the time. Yeah, they seem to have, as I said before, come out of it reasonably well. Right? I haven't. I'm still being victimised very, very heavily by these people. I've been recently, in the last 3 years, manipulating into a zero income situation. It is, I'm being sent subliminal messages about contributions to society, providing value, and all sorts of other stuff. It has gone to a different level than what it originally appeared to be. you know, it has gone to a kind of, you know, sort of Agenda 21 life destruction thing, very heavily fanatical and very heavily symbolism based, kind of takedowns of victims' lives. And it is my belief that this is how the UK is carrying out Agenda 21.
How do you see the, excuse me, how do you see the Brian Harvey situation then, Paul? Obviously, you've got your situation here, and unfortunately, forgive me, but you, I don't mean this in a derogatory sense, but you're a bit of a nobody. Nobody knows who you are. You know what I mean? When I say that, you know exactly what I'm saying.
I'm not a bit. Well, I'm not a bit of a nobody. I'm a complete nobody.
You know what I mean when I say that. I don't mean it in any kind of derogatory sense.
I've been taken out of society completely.
Yes, exactly.
What they did to me originally was, as I say, they removed me from London society and left me homeless, and I was completely removed from, after being there, you know, 14 years. I was completely removed from London society. There was no way I could carry on in London at the end of that project. Yeah. It was completely deliberate. I had been sort of symbolically removed from society, and I was told that during the course of the proceedings. You know, as I say, a couple of the comments and so on from some of the people, that I was being, that my future had been mapped out and I'd been taken out of the loop, and also William himself saying I'd get what I deserve. Now, for some reason, William thought that, you know, what I deserved was to be made homeless and, you know, penniless, defrauded out of, you know, everything I had. That's up to him. I disagree, obviously. You know, that wasn't when I got involved with William in March 2001. It wasn't under those, you know, I would not have agreed to those that kind of situation happening. So it was a kind of, you know, a very kind of strange thing that happened to me. Now the Brian Harvey thing. Now I know I've already said Jacob Browns is a known New World Order Agenda 21 spy. Yeah, known. An eyewitness at Parissa's, which was William's spy house, at Zoran's, which was William's Montenegrin spy, where he was invited to stay. He visited both of those places again, manipulative process. Yeah, every aspect of my life was manipulated by these people. You know, I've got to know everything about them. You know, literally everything. And now Brian Harvey would probably know Jacob Brown's nightclub. Yeah. So that's where I've mentioned the cross-reference to my own and Brian Harvey's case. Both came you know, through London in the 90s, and these people, you know, were there then. And so there is a cross-reference there, but there might be others. You know, there might well be some other people involved in that. Yeah.
It does seem to be that Brian's situation is that he's got the evidence there, isn't he? That's what it seems like. He's got the stuff there, and clearly, you know, the police are not interested. They don't want to know, and it just seems that they've got a bit of a thorn in their side with regards to Brian. I've reached out to him a couple of times, and understandably, he's not got back to me, and I understand that. You know, he's in a position where who can you trust? And I do get that, and perhaps I might get to chat to him at some point in the future. But it does seem to be that it's a bit of a difficult one with him.
The situation is that Brian is a UK citizen, right, who should not any longer, for the rest of his life, be a UK citizen. A little bit like me, because what you have got is I mean, essentially, it is the government behind this. Right, these people are backed by the UK government. Yeah, so whatever they do is essentially in the name of the UK government.
Yeah, the highest backing, as they say.
Right. So you have got a situation where Brian Harvey and myself are being. I mean, you know, nobody knows me. So you know, it is a very different situation for me. But both being targeted and victimised by what is essentially the UK government. So you're in a situation where the UK government don't want you anymore. Yeah, they literally don't want you anymore. Yeah, so you cannot sort of contribute, or you cannot take sort of accept the jurisdiction of the government that essentially wants you removed, or your life ruined. You can't have any kind of affinity or accept the jurisdiction of a government that wants you literally pretty much dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Brian Harvey's possibly in a similar situation. He obviously knows the reason he is being targeted is because of his compromising knowledge of certain things. He will have this. They are things like my knowledge that he will never unknow. He will always have that knowledge. So he will therefore always have the people interested in that knowledge targeting him. Yeah. So he's in a very unusual situation, like myself. You've got to say, well, look, you have got the UK government victimising you on a major level, on a life ruining level. Yeah, that they will do everything that they can and want to do to make sure you don't make any progress in life. Yeah. Now, I don't know Brian's asset income situation, right? But I do know mine. Yeah? And it's something that you've got to figure out a way of dealing with. Now, my view is that he should be suing the UK government for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and zersetsung, because that is what they are doing. Yeah. They will be using weaponized algorithm surveillance technology to technologically gaslight him. They will be using gang stalking techniques to manipulate him and psychologically abuse him, and various other sort of takedowns of his life, which is exactly what they're doing to me. Yeah. So you're kind of in a very unusual situation. The way they use zersetsung is sort of, nobody else knows it's being done. To everybody else, things look normal. Yeah, and that's how it's done. Yeah, they do it in a way that nobody else can tell that it's being done to the victim, and that's why Brian Harvey has been sort of said to be mad or said to be paranoid or whatever. Yeah, when in fact he is not. He's just very perceptive as to what is going on and what is, going on in his life and so on.
Yeah.
As of course am I. Yeah. And this is a situation you've got into. Brian's career choice was as a pop star. Yeah. Now, I know them to be able to take down pretty much anybody. It doesn't matter how much money they've got. Yeah. They'll take down billionaires. Yeah. So victims have got very, very serious problems. Yeah. Most victims don't have the resources to fight these people. Yeah. They're literally manipulated usually into a no income situation, or no assets and no resources. They've got no resources to fight. Yeah. And again, that's classic zersetsung techniques. Yeah. It's documented in the zersetsung case files that the East German state did in fact manipulate those victims into such so many problems and various different kind of financial problems, career problems, work problems, family problems. It came from all sides. Yeah, that literally manipulated every aspect of the victim's life to make sure that they just didn't have the ability to fight back, and that's what these people are doing. Yeah, it is a literal takedown of the victim's life.
Yeah.
On a life ruining level.
Yeah.
Literally hasn't got a life. When this kind of stuff's being done. Especially if they are being gaslighted or psychologically abused as well. That's reinforced every day. It's done on a daily basis, so it's reinforced that the victim, is being told constantly that they are being taken down. You know, they're literally told what's happening, what's being done to them. You know, and again, that's a psychological thing.
Yeah.
The sort of victims in a spiral. They're like, you know, they're being told what's going to be done to them, and they can't stop it being done.
Well, it's just the absolute mind fuckeries, isn't it?
Yeah,
to be, you know,
of course. Yeah. So,
yeah.
you know, as I say, this has developed for me over 21 years. I mean, you know, it started, as I said, in '97, 10 years of gang stalking, and then another 12 years of extreme abuse, you know, slowly incremental abuse. And the reason is clearly, I mean, we haven't got to this yet, but the Litvinenko murder in 2006, yeah, took place in the Millennium Hotel. Now, I stayed there many times during the course of that project. I was, you know, invited to various places during that project. One was Yves Carlo Williams' wedding in 2004, and another one was his house in Brussels at New Year a few months later. Yeah. On both occasions, I was also at the same time invited to stay at the Millennium Hotel. And during the course of that project, I stayed there quite a number of times. And I know, you know, full well that the owner or the head of the Millennium at the time was a man called Ali, who I'd known since about 1997 again. Yeah. And I know him to be an Yves Carlo Williams spy network. He is a Stasi spy. Yeah. And this is something I kept quiet about after that happened. You know, I mean, I got a bit, you know, sort of freaked out by what had been done to me, you know, 10 years gang stalking. And the fact that the murder took place as well, you know, during the sort of course of it. And I, you know, pretty much knew exactly who'd done it. Yeah. And this has proved, this is obviously proved to be the reason for my continued victimization by these people. Yeah. It's a very unusual situation. You know, when it took place in 2006, I didn't say anything, obviously. I was, after I was declared dead in 2007, I continued to receive phone calls from the people I've been involved in. None of them ever mentioned the fact that I, you know, being made homeless and this, that, and the other at the time. And this again is classic sort of indication of how they operate. The way they operate is that literally nothing's happened. Yeah, that's how they view things. Yeah, everything is kind of natural, normal. There's no admission of anything. Yeah, it's complete secrecy, complete no admission, nothing of that anything's going on, and this is how it's all done.
It's well, it's, you know, as I said earlier, it beggars belief, Paul. But you know, and had I come across this information, you know, maybe a few years ago, I'd think, oh, this guy, he's got a hell of a story. How sound of mind is he, and all the rest of it, you know. But know what I know now, Paul. You know, I know what I know now through my research.
You're talking a major story here. You're talking about a Stasi network in London that is backed by the UK government, that has pretty much done all the murders. Maxwell, Bereznov, Litvinenko, Diana, Dodi, Royal Baby Nurse, you name it, they've probably done it. Yeah, because literally nothing happens without these people knowing about it. So the conclusion is that they either allowed it to happen or they did it themselves.
Yeah, not facilitated or whatever it was. Yeah. So where are we now then, Paul, with regards to your narrative? How far have we got?
Well, we haven't done much of the gangster project, and that's really going to confuse people a lot. So I think it's probably best to leave that the intricate details of that for the time being, because in actual fact that thing is only a very small part of the overall problem. the overall picture and so on. The general, what it's evolved into, the Agenda 21 thing, the control of the blanket control of employment markets, companies, corporations, banks, and everything else in the UK. The attitude, the slow erosion of UK residents' general life standards, living standards, etc. over the last 30 years is pretty much all down to this network. Yeah. Most people don't even know it exists.
Yeah.
They all think they vote people into power. Yeah. And that's not the case, I'm afraid. Yeah. So
within the next CEO of the corporation, as they say.
Yeah, this is it. So it's a very, it's very unusual kind of thing. Revelations. You're talking going back 30 years. You're talking about covered up murders. You're talking about attacks on the pound that could have been stopped but weren't. You're talking about deliberate engineering by politicians, and literal no regard for the welfare of the UK public in general. Yeah.
I've covered this before, Paul, and it seems to be that these people in these positions of power, they have no love or no loyalty to the geographical locations in which they operate. No. They are above and beyond any kind of geographical kind of. Yeah.
There's the old story that the old adage that if your ambition is to be a politician, then you don't deserve it or whatever stands true. That they're literally not doing much at all.
Yeah.
Because the UK is run by a kind of high-tech spy Stasi network. Yeah. And the roots of it go back to banks and Wall Street and everything else. It is literally a kind of tacitly manipulated slave empire. Yeah. And that's what we come to when we get to the last 12 years of me, my victimization and so on. So it's something obviously I've got major issues with, having worked for these people as such for 10 years for free with no pay and getting defrauded out of everything and so on, and then continuing to be abused for the next 12 years and so on. It's made a serious mess of my life getting involved with those people. I could have done a lot different with the last 21 years had I not got involved with Eve Carlo William, yeah, and being used for his, gangster project or whatever. So obviously I've got major problems with it. At 61, on paper, irreversibly ruined. I know you see a lot on YouTube about a homeless guy turns into a billionaire and all the rest of it. But, I don't think there's many at 61 managed to do that. Yeah. So we're talking a bit of a different ball game here. I'm looking, unless I get legal help with this at the end of my life. Yeah. I'm looking at literally disappearing from society altogether and winding up picking up banana skins. Right. I don't plan to do that, but I think I've got serious problems with the UK government because, for one thing, I'm deemed now to be someone at 61 with very low assets and very low income and, virtually no income now. And I'm now considered a potential liability to the state. Yeah?
Yeah.
Unless I...
the stuff brother, especially with the stuff you're talking about.
Unless I pull something out the bag, I'm a potential liability in future. Yeah. Et cetera, and this is another core issue of the Agenda 21 thing. Yeah.
So if I may then, Paul, we have covered this kind of a little bit briefly in our conversations, and we know that there are multiple people coming at this information from different angles, and as I mentioned, Kevin Christian in America, his whole thing with the remote neural monitoring is very, very interesting, and he's got quite a following, and he's doing his thing. And as I said, I've been following Catherine Horton's work, and she's putting her stuff together. But there seems to be a lot of division as well amongst, I know you said you've reached out to Catherine and she has gone back, and I've reached out to her as well. And again, I understand that, people who are operating within these kind of fields are suspicious of, anyone really, I guess. But with regards to what you know of Catherine and the work that she's been doing, what are you seeing coming from that kind of arena?
Well, not a lot. I have, I've been, what I got involved with was spying at the highest level in the UK. Benito, these are the highest level spies in the UK. Yeah, they don't work for MI5. They don't work for MI6. It wasn't a GCHQ operation. It doesn't seem to me that the level of capability of the technology they're using to victimize people is GCHQ. I don't believe they're doing the stuff they're doing to me from GCHQ.
Okay.
I believe there are separate secret surveillance data centers or whatever control centers that are doing this stuff. Because I am literally, going to the shop, and they're predicting what I'm going to do when I go to the shop, etc. And they're triggering events in my day. That they're triggering.
Talk us through this if you would, Paul. Because I know for some people it's going to sound absolutely, mind-boggling, but if you would, because you know what I'm about, brother. I understand what's going on here. Talk us through, a typical experience of these subliminals and things, because people just wouldn't believe it. But if you would, just give us and don't be afraid. Just give it to us all barrels, brother, if you would, please.
There's a few. When I came back to Doncaster, there were a few instances of Carlo William, still messing about with my life. Yeah, he was still doing stuff, and I got. I was sent a car number plate when Rocky came up in 2006. When we went to an car auction, and he pointed me out this car that said, with a number plate saying SST Boss, and he said, go, buy that or whatever, and this, that, and the other. And I had a few pounds at the time, so I bought it, and I kept it in the garage for a long time. It was a sort of kind of relevant thing because it was to do with the gangster thing that I've been involved in, and it's kind of really sort of got me annoyed being labelled into this gangster stuff, because it's something I've never been. I've never been involved in it. I didn't even know them. I didn't know the people. I didn't know I know of them. I knew of them at the time, but I didn't know any, other than that, I didn't know anything. And I've never been involved in crime either. Any kind of crime. Yeah. So it is a bit of a, it's very annoying to get sort of tarred with it. And that was an instance. I was sent the car number plate. I've been sent a car, a number plate parked outside with a sort of abusive message on it as a number plate. And I've been sent a ton of this stuff. And that started being done in the sort of mid 2010s, mid 2000s. It carried on, from there. And I've actually had, during the sort of between the roughly 2007 and 2008, 2009, I was sent doppelgangers. William would send doppelgangers, like lookalikes of himself, to walk past and things like that. The man has been and is trying to play mind games and trying to play, gaslighting games and this, that, and the other. I mean, he's been found out, obviously, what he's been doing. It's all documented, or most of it is documented, what he's been doing. And as I say, there's examples. I've been sent 2 different doppelgangers. Yeah, that's just lookalikes, and that's just to remind the victim that they are being, watched, etc. Again, psychological and stuff like that. The man plays serious mind games with the victim. Yeah, and there's no question what he's been doing to me over 21 years. There's no question that if this was heard properly and fairly in a court, a proper court, not a jumped up, corrupt one, then he would get 20 years in prison for what he's done to me. Yeah, that's just me. I don't know how many other victims he's got. Yeah, But you're definitely talking about probably one of the most sinister and seriously criminal Stasi spies in modern UK history. Yeah, and still nobody knows about him. Yeah. So, you know, I've got, you can see why I'm looking for a lawyer with regard to, you know, what I've got involved in here, because
Oh, for sure, yeah.
this man is targeting me for some very specific reasons. And it is very nasty to become a victim of it. He, as I say, the other stuff, I mean, it comes coming later in the last 6 years or so is absolutely astounding. Some of the stuff that's being done to me over the last 6 years, absolutely astounding. And if we just take a quick break, we'll come to that in a minute. Yeah?
Okay, brother. Yeah, by all means.